in every possible way. It means that you can buy, the whole political system is up for sale because of that one particular law. So in consequence, it is a charade. The whole thing is a charade now. It has nothing to do with government of the people, by the people, for the people. There is no longer any safety net. This particular administration, it has shown and is completely honest about the fact that it wants to dismantle all humane federal governmental agencies that look after the environment, the old, the sick, the aged, anybody poor, they need to be destroyed on the altar of the advance of the corporations. And if what I was saying wasn't true, it would sound crazy, but it's not. It's actually true. So that must be kept from the public. It has to be kept off the mainstream media. We must not talk. We can't talk about it. Like Palestine.
And you wrote that song 40 years ago, but in much of the establishment's criticism of Trump, we hear the phrase, I hear it all the time in particularly liberal media, this is not normal, that somehow Trump is more authoritarian or militaristic, brutish than anyone else who's ever run this country or been involved in politics. Do you think Trump really represents something unique in the United States?
Only because he's supremely dumb. You know, he is a nincompoop, and self-evidently, and he kind of professes that publicly all the time with his tweets, and just generally with the way he behaves and whatever.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
So he is he's different than Obama was, or even than Clinton. They were much smoother operators, but they were still operating policies which are fundamentally wrong and inhuman, and particularly in their waging of war against the rest of the world. You know, this idea that the United States needs to be a military presence over the whole globe and needs to be threatening as much as it can and controlling as much as it can. And, it's deeply and desperately dangerous, particularly in the world we live in, where we still, after all these years, have countries that have nuclear weapons. So that we could be sitting here talking, and what a surprise it will be if there's a whoomph and all the lights go out because of some electromagnetic thing, and then suddenly we realize it happened. Wow, and it's what we've all been talking about. And the wise men have all been warning us for years and years and years. Just last week they came out and they said the doomsday clock is at 2.5 minutes to midnight. This is the closest we've been to the nuclear catastrophe since the end of the Second World War. And yet, what do we talk about?
Well, we talk
Russiagate?
We talk about heightening tensions with Russia.
Well, and it's why, you know, why you have to ask yourself why would we do that? Why would John McCain want to be going and having a war with Russia? Why would we be wanting to have more and more boats in the Black Sea or wherever they are? Why? Why this obsession with Russia? Why not? Why not? Maybe that's the only tiny bit of sense that Trump has made, is that it might be a good idea to actually have conversations with the Russians. The guy, I can't remember his name, but the foreign minister seems to be eminently sensible and eloquent.
Lavrov.
Yeah, and also people I think would do well to re-go over the interviews that Oliver Stone did with Putin, because when you actually listen to it, if you would compare Vladimir Putin with Donald Trump, and you go, which man would you rather sit down and have a conversation with? There's no question. This one's a complete buffoon who doesn't make any sense, knows nothing about anything. This guy may be power hungry, and he may be, but at least he's coherent. At least he can string a sentence together. At least he reads about the political situations in the places that his country is involved in, which are, let it not be said, all on his doorstep. Putin is not frigging around in Mexico. He doesn't have nuclear missiles just over the Mexican border.
So you're obviously not afraid of being called a Putin apologist now, like Oliver has been, for pointing out these things.
No, of course I'm not afraid. It's just the reality of the situation. That gets back to the idea that what's important to the mainstream media is propaganda. And that's what it's about. It's become a tool of propaganda, maybe unwittingly to some large extent.
Finally, you're on the Us and Them tour right now throughout the States and then I believe Europe as well. For your fans coming to your shows, how would you like them to take your music and translate it into action in their own lives, their role of humans? I hear you talk about that a lot, your role as a human being, especially your fans in Israel who might be wanting to know why that music can't be played in their country.
Well, it'd be very hard for, not for all Israeli fans, because obviously I'm in touch with many of them. There is a big resistance movement in Israel. There's a particular organization called Boycott from Within, run by a guy I know called Ronnie Barkan, and it's a proper organization, and they're extremely brave because in the face of the intransigence of most of the Zionists in Israel, they are actually running their own form of resistance because they are caring Jewish people who are deeply distressed that the policies of the Israeli government run contrary to the humane tenets of Judaism and what's actually in the Torah and what they believe their connection with their religion. I'm an agnostic, so it's really none of my business, but we do know that all those Judaic-based religions all have the same basic ideas about them. But you asked me something else. In this, I'll tell you something. We've done 30 gigs in this country, and everywhere we play, because the show is very political, but people see it and they understand that it's about us recognizing the predicament of others. It attaches very much to the philosophical position that we should do as we would be done by. It's a character from Charles Kingsley's Water Babies. Mrs. Do as you would be done by says that. But it is incumbent upon us all, and upon our politicians, and on all those of us who think about people who might be on the other side of an argument, to put ourselves in their shoes. How would we feel sitting here in Washington if there were drones buzzing around in the sky all day and we never knew when we were going to be blown out of our socks? Because the drone attacks, for instance, targeted assassinations, of which I have to say I could not have been more disapproving of when the last administration was in power. Why Barack Obama continued and expanded that drone program, I will never know. I haven't had the chance to ask him about that, and I probably never will. But I have no idea. It's hard to imagine a sensible reply. I mean, he might say, oh, well, we have to fight terror. Please, you must see that being that kind of belligerent, bellicose, deadly presence in 137 foreign countries can only encourage a resistance to that completely unacceptable colonial and imperialist behavior. It's inevitable. No, you can't cut the head of a snake. Anyway, that's a long conversation. But what I've found in my shows is that we discover that 10 or 12,000 people, tiny as that number is, are desperate to be in a place of love for their fellow human beings, to support their fellow. They want to help people. They don't want to be part of this administration's charge towards ripping the rug out from under society as a whole, giving it entirely over to the corporations and the few very, very rich, very, very greedy men who run everything. They want there to be a society where they care for their brothers and sisters. And they would like that to extend beyond the national borders of the United States, not just into Mexico and South America, where Trump thinks the enemy are, but also into policies in the Middle East and all, so that they start addressing the idea that all human beings deserve human and civil rights, including the Palestinians. In fact, from my position as an active member of BDS, especially my brothers and sisters in Palestine who've been living under military occupation for 50 years, since 1967. And so we continue in the struggle, and we're winning it. This is why they call me an anti-Semite. This is why they want to silence me. This is why they don't want me on Charlie Rose or Stephen Colbert speaking. He lets me play my song, but I'm not allowed to sit on the couch and talk because because they don't want to hear it. But it's spreading, and that's why they're so frightened.
68 years following the Peekskill riots, artists in the United States are still targeted for their political beliefs, now by a powerful lobby in Washington representing the interests of the Israeli government. What's more, 7 decades on from the Second Red Scare and the beginning of the McCarthy era, a Russian menace still looms in the minds of Washington's political class, and many lawmakers are fixated on escalating with Russia all over again. The threat of mutually assured destruction has yet to temper the bellicose rhetoric from our leaders. Now, as during the original Cold War, it seems that only a handful of artists and thinkers are brave enough to put careerism aside, to lead with their humanity, and to question more.